Unearthing tombs can reveal so much about our ancient history, but it can also bring us some pretty horrific things. From a lot of mummies and all that comes with unearthing the dead, to mummified animals and bugs, and so much more. On today's top 10 list, we are going to be covering the top 10 horrifying things recovered from ancient tombs. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have a black granite sarcophagus. In 2018, archaeologists in Egypt found a massive black granite sarcophagus in Alexandria, Egypt, that dated all the way back to 2,000 years ago. Rumors immediately started swirling about what this sarcophagus might have contained, but the best way to find out? Well, you have to open it, of course. Instead of some crazy curse being unleashed, the first thing that escaped this tomb when opened was a horrible, unbearable smell. Apparently it was so bad that the site had to be evacuated for a while before they could return to finish opening it up. When they finally were able to completely lift the lid, they found a red-brown-like sewage water flooding the bottom, which is likely where that horrible smell was coming from. Other than all that gross stuff, inside the sarcophagus were the bones of 3 people. Unfortunately, the mummies did not end up being well preserved, so only the skeletal remains were still intact. It is believed that the people inside may have been soldiers from the time of pharaohs. This is believed because one of the skulls had a crack in it from an arrow. There was a bust found along with the tomb, but unfortunately due to time past, it has been weathered beyond recognition, but that is not the only way researchers can find out where the soldiers are from and what time period they lived in. In our number 9 spot today, we have the knife-armed man. In 2018, while researchers were excavating a 1,200 to 1,400 year old necropolis in northern Italy, they made a gruesome discovery that led to us learning a super interesting story of someone who lived all those years ago. Inside this necropolis there were the remains of a man, but what set him apart from the others is that he had a knife blade prosthetic arm. Further analysis of his bones showed that his arm had been removed via blunt force trauma. Normally all those years ago the wounds would have killed you, if not from the blood loss, then from infection, because of course this was a time before antibiotics, but somehow this man managed to survive it all, and in doing that he made himself the scariest prosthetic limb I've ever heard of. He replaced his missing hand with a long knife buckled to his arm with leather straps. It's like pretty metal. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Tomb of Ptahmes. A few years ago, archaeologists were searching in the Tomb of Ptahmes, who is a high-ranking Egyptian official. Within the tomb, they found jars that contained something they weren't exactly sure of. Well, further research was able to date this substance back 3,200 years ago, and guess what it was? Cheese. Dr. Enrico Greco from the University of Catania, who worked with colleagues from the Cairo University in Egypt to determine what this substance was, said, quote, "The material analyzed is probably the most ancient archaeological solid residue of cheese ever found to date. We know it was made mostly from sheep's and goat's milk, but for me it's really hard to imagine a specific flavor." While this is a super cool discovery and one that gives us incredible insight into those times thousands of years ago, imagine finding a 1,000-year-old cheese. That sounds absolutely disgusting. Honestly, I'm so grateful for the scientists who put up with things like that so we can have answers to these sorts of things. In our number 7 spot today, we have cats. In 2018, archaeologists were excavating a 4,500-year-old tomb that was found near Cairo, and if you're a cat person, this one might be one for you to skip over. Inside of this tomb, not only did researchers find 100 gilded wooden cats along with a bronze statue of Bastet, the goddess of cats, but they made the startling discovery of dozens of mummified cats. It is known in ancient Egyptian culture that cats were highly regarded and admired by humans. They weren't necessarily worshipped or anything like that, but they did see them as divine. The tomb these cats were found in has been dated back to the 5th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. While the looks of the cats is an absolutely horrifying one, not only was this find incredibly interesting, but it also showed that the mummification process is highly effective. In our number 6 spot today, we have scratch marks. When archaeologists opened a tomb they had located that dated all the way back to the Qing dynasty, they certainly did not expect to find what was inside. They weren't shocked to find the remains of a person, but what was shocking was the state she was in. Her skin had turned black like charcoal, and she had a terrifying expression expression on her face, with her mouth wide open like she had been screaming. To make matters even worse, apparently there were scratch marks that she had left on the inside. Further research showed that it is believed that this woman suffered from a difficult birth, and during labor she fainted. Since childbirth used to be a way more dangerous activity, it is thought that her family believed she had passed away, and then they buried her, and of course you know the rest. What a horrifying story for everyone involved. In our number 5 spot today, we have the silver Sumerian harp. The silver Sumerian harp was found in a very large royal tomb of ancient Sumeria. You might be sitting there thinking, a harp isn't exactly terrifying, and I agree. This harp certainly was not a terrifying find, but the scene it was found amongst absolutely was. The tomb contained not only the harp, but the musician who was playing it, along with an entire group of musicians, servants, and several soldiers, all who were sealed in this tomb while they were performing their duties. Many of them were dressed in what was considered formal attire and were wearing gorgeous jewelry. The area where all of these people were found is referred to as the death pit because of the large number of bodies found within it. Music was an incredibly important part of life, celebratory and ritual occasions in ancient Mesopotamia. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Tomb of Sunken Skulls. In 2009, archaeologists were excavating the bottom of a prehistoric dry lake bed in Sweden when they began to find the foundations of some sort of a stone structure. Yeah, we're talking about a tomb found at the bottom of a lake. Further research began to unearth the usual things like animal bones, stone tools, and that sort of thing, but they also uncovered skulls belonging to 10 people that are believed to have lived 8,000 years ago. They found another 11th skull buried deep within the mud, and when they uncovered it, they found that fragments of another one of the skulls had been deliberately lodged inside of this 11th skull. Almost all of the skulls were jawless and were mounted on stakes. There are a few theories as to why the skulls were here, and some people believe that this site may have been used for secondary burials, but others believe that this tomb belonged to enemies that were killed in combat. Either way, researchers were rightfully shocked when they unearthed this tomb. In our number 3 spot today, we have Biscuit Beetles. Okay, I know this one won't be horrifying to everyone, but as you guys know, I really hate bugs a lot, so this one seems like my worst nightmare. As it turns out, mummies aren't the only things that tombs can preserve. Unfortunately, some little beetles from 3,000 years ago managed to find themselves preserved inside of a loaf of funerary bread that was found inside of a tomb inside the necropolis of ancient Thebes. Food would often be left inside of ancient Egyptian tombs because they were symbolic offerings intended to feed the deceased in the afterlife. Well, the deceased apparently weren't the only ones chowing down because a bunch of biscuit beetles were found inside the bread. I just can't imagine being stoked to find a mummy and instead finding bugs. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Tomb of Hatshepsut. She was the 5th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, and she was the 2nd historically confirmed female pharaoh. She was an incredibly interesting person who we could really talk about all day, but we are here talking about tombs, so let's cut to when hers was found and unearthed. There were a few interesting things found within her tomb, but the real horrors came after when they began to examine her remains. They were actually able to find a cause of death for her and can actually attribute it to something she possessed. They found benzoprine carcinogenic skin lotion with the pharaoh, and it is believed that this gave her bone cancer. It is likely that she poisoned herself accidentally while she was just trying to soothe her skin. Being diagnosed with something like that with the help of modern medicine is already a horrible, painful, and scary thing. I couldn't even imagine having to go through it all those years ago without any kind of a treatment. In our number 1 spot today, we have this ancient curse. To end off this list today, we have a good old-fashioned curse that was unleashed from inside of a tomb. Okay, maybe that was a bit of an exaggeration, but there really was a curse found on the inside of this tomb. The tomb of Ankh-Mahor, who was a pharaoh's official who is thought to have lived around 4,000 years ago during Egypt's 6th dynasty, was an above-ground tomb that was shaped like a rectangular box. Inside of the tomb, they found a curse inscribed that warned anyone who dared to disturb it. The curse, roughly translated, states that anything a trespasser, quote, might do against this, my tomb, the same shall be done to your property, mummy. It then goes on to warn the trespasser of his knowledge of spells and secret magic, and it threatens to fill impure intruders with the fear of seeing ghosts. These kind of curses have been found in other tombs, and while they certainly are nothing like the ones depicted in horror movies about mummies, it might still be a little unnerving to those unearthing this discovery. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. Make sure you like this video if you liked it. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see more. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye.